Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to my channel. It's called The Astonishing History. So, in today's series, we will talk and discover about that why did King Richard III had killed his nephew, and what was the War of the Roses, and who started it, and why was it started. So, in this topic, we have double topics, and I am going to briefly explain into one category. Now, firstly, that during the time of the 14th and 15th century, the medieval hygiene was a bit low, and plus, there is a mystery that how did King Edward V was killed. Some historians say that Edward V was disappeared by his appearance, and also his younger brother, who was Richard, Duke of York. Now, just keep in mind that Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, they were two siblings of one father, and their father was Edward IV, and their mother was Elizabeth Woodville. Now, this was the whole family of Edward V's parents and his younger brother. Plus, Edward IV's younger brother, who was Richard III of England, he was the last ruler of the Pelagian dynasty, from Henry II to Richard III. Now, this is a very big mystery that why did his uncle Edward's brother and Edward V's uncle had killed both of his nephews. Now some people say that they were disappeared, they were dead during the sleep, and some emergence, some records are told by historians that they went to a castle and they were disappeared in London. But none of them was true. Now, in sources, it is said that Richard III was their uncle, and their uncle was very jealous of invade to kill them. Some relatives of Edward V, aunts and uncles, were also frustrated with Edward V. Plus, that he was only 12 years old when he was killed in action. And soon after, in the 16th and 17th century, in 1676, his body was found alive, plus with bones. He was dead, but his corpse was still there. Now, beginning to the part that how was Richard III able to kill Edward V. No, Edward V was born in 1470 and he died in the age of 1483. He died in the age of 13 in 1483. So this shows that the two princesses who were killed in the Tower of London, they were the optimizers. They were the ones who were being used as a toy. So after their father's death, Edward IV in 1483, a few couple of months later, the two princesses were dead and they were killed in action. But mystery has not been solved yet that perhaps Richard III had killed the two princesses and kept their bodies in a sacred place that no one will know later. But the same place takes in that in 1676, when the time of King Charles II, the people of England had found corpse and body scan X-ray, which was the body of King Edward V and Richard Duke of York. Now let's talk about King Edward right here. Sorry, King Richard right here. King Richard III was the last Pelagian dynasty since Henry II. Now, when King Richard III had killed his nephews, who were Edward V and Richard Duke of York, he became the next king. Until then, that in 1455 to 1485, the 30-Year War, or the War of the Roses, occurred. When the War of the Roses had occurred, many people were from the Lancashire side or the York side. Although Richard III was from the York side is the basically the rose of the white rose, and the Lancasters are from the red rose. So this war had occurred for 3 decades nearly, and many kings like Edward IV or Richard III or Henry VI and Henry V, Henry VII. These were all the main characters who participated in this war. Now, in 1485, when the War of the Roses had started to an end, and after 2 years of the incident, when when Edward V and Richard Duke of York were killed, 2 years later in 1485, the War of the Roses had came to an end. So, after the War of the Roses, obviously, all might you know that all of you know that King Henry VII became the ruler after killing Richard III, and this was the House of Tudor from 1485 to 1603. So, however, when at the Battle of Bosworth, when Henry VII and Richard III, they were not direct cousins, but they were far away relatives from each other. So the battle was started, and 2,000 troops and armed forces cannons were emerged by Henry VII's army, and Richard III was also had around 4,000 troops, more than Henry VII's army. So, during that force, many bloodshed and wars had occurred. So, however, in 1485, say 22nd of August, Henry VII became the next king, and he was the line of the Tudors from 1485 to 1603. Now, this is a quite occurred that did Henry VII killed Richard III on purpose? The answer is no, because Richard III was very corrupt. He wanted his own family to be successful, plus that his aunts and his sisters, brothers were all against his older brother who was Edward IV, and plus another narration talks about that did Edward IV was really a corrupt ruler? Basically, no. Edward IV was a basically a kind ruler, but in when including his younger brother Richard III, he killed his nephews and also he died, and they were direct descendants of Edward III, which ruled in 1348 during the Black Death. So the War of the Roses had occurred later on, and the Lancaster were the red rose and the Yorks were the white rose. Both of them, when they combined and after the Battle of Bosworth, it became the Tudors. So the Tudors ruled for nearly 118 years, and I hope you like the story. And if you want to follow for more information about history, and hit the bell icon, share it, and subscribe to this channel, because we are nearly promoting more and more videos after every 2 weeks or 1 week, and coming with more amazing topics. So I told you that this is the incident of the two princesses in the Tower of London, and I have described them in order. That Edward V was born in 1470, and later when they died in Westminster Abbey, which is in England right now, at the capital of London, the capital of England, which is London right now. And in that place, nearly the Tower of London, they were buried in Westminster Abbey. Now, let's talk about a brief case of study in Richard III. In 2012, Richard III was found alive, since historians had noticed that this is a body of bones where it is buried under the parking lot. So, historians had made successful DNAs, and they found out that this body is Richard III's body when he died at the Battle of Bosworth in 22nd August 1485. So I hope that this video, thank you, and share and subscribe to our new channel, new promotions, and other various types of elements in history. So we'll see you next time. Thank you. Allah.